And yeah, just tell us about yourself. Well, this is, by the way, guys, anybody who's watching this is the very first time I've ever met Shane. I met him through my friend Amy, and I genuinely been following your page for like only a few weeks, and I was like, this guy's just on the same level as me, man. This is awesome. So I had to reach out and ask you to jump on the show. So Shane, yeah, just introduce yourself and just tell us who you are, mate. I'm going to be taking notes today as well. Probably learning a lot from you. So please fire away.
I don't know how kind of deep you want me to go with things, but I work as an anxiety specialist. I work with clients worldwide. I'm hearing an echo though on your side. I don't know if is that better?
Seems like it.
Anyway, so I work as an anxiety specialist. I work with clients all over around the world and kind of fell into it. I was a personal trainer for like 13 years, and for a long time I was enjoying it. I loved the job, and I've always been into personal development. I've always wanted to help people become the best version of themselves. And it got to the point where I would be helping people and I'd give amazing body transformations, but I have some clients where they still weren't happy with themselves. And even for me, like I was doing all the bodybuilding shows, doing all the fitness shows, I'd done really well with them, looked amazing on the outside, but I still wasn't feeling kind of fulfilled myself, and something was still missing. And then for years this kind of went on where I was just probably a bit disconnected from life and I wasn't really connected to myself, and I was probably a bit disillusioned. I was chasing success, I was chasing all the money and everything like that, and everything that they kind of tell you what success is. And I just wasn't really feeling fulfilled, and it got to a point where I was having panic attacks, and I was never anyone that would ever thought I had anxiety. I was never somebody who would have said that I had a bad childhood or that I had experienced trauma, anything like that. But the reality was I was probably a very high functioning anxious person for most of my life. The bodybuilding lifestyle kind of hit it a lot because I wasn't socializing, I wasn't going out, I wasn't kind of drinking, things like that. But it got to a point where I was having panic attacks where heart was kind of beating at my chest, didn't really know what was going on, and felt really, really overwhelmed. But at the same time, a lot of people with anxiety don't want to make a fuss. They're not very good at actually expressing what it is they're actually feeling. And I didn't even know what it was that I was feeling. I just knew that I felt really overwhelmed. So I ended up sort of going to A&E, probably over time, probably twice actually, where once I thought I was, having a heart attack, and that was a few years ago, and this was a few years later. Even though I was going to the doctors, I was getting heart scans and stuff where they thought I had like an irregular heartbeat and all this sort of thing. Doctors wanted to look at all the physical sides, but not once was I ever asked what my stress levels were like, if I was feeling anxious, what my mental health was like. I was never asked any of those things, and it ended up me having sort of panic attacks, and I'm going to A&E twice now, and this is over a few years, that eventually they sort of said, yeah, you have anxiety, and that led me down the path of kind of what I started today. A friend of mine was studying psychotherapy and hypnotherapy. We was playing around with some stuff. I noticed some shifts, I noticed some changes. So I thought, you know what, there must be something to this. So I thought, you know what, I'll keep an open mind, and I've always been like a left-brain logical thinker. So I've always been quite like kind of science and the evidence kind of based thing. But I thought, you know what, there must be an answer out there. I can't be the only person out of 7 billion who has this problem that's, that needs a solution. So I looked where success was, and success always leaves clues. So I kind of basically just studied and just learned, and just from one course led me to another, led me to new people, that led me to another thing, And it did work, and eventually I understand and explored a lot of this kind of the trauma-based and trauma-informed therapy, a lot of these kind of bottom-up therapies, psychocentric therapies, and I started getting qualified in those. Spent tens of thousands of pounds on all these different courses, and now I've refined my own process where basically if you have anxiety or trauma, anything like that, I can pretty much guarantee your results if somebody's ready to do the work. So I've refined my own process in terms of how somebody can approach anxiety. But it's also like a lot of the clients that I work with, they probably wouldn't even say that they had anxiety. Like I never would have thought that I was someone that was anxiety. I thought you'd have to be some, really worrying, anxious person that's kind of worrying all the time. And I was, I'm a pretty chill guy. Even when I had really bad anxiety, I wasn't stressing out outwardly. On the inside, I probably was, but it wasn't very evident on the outside. I wasn't someone that was kind of always chronically worrying. So a lot of the clients I have, it's just basically healing unconscious patterns. My goal is to basically return people back to their true self. When you're born the 100% best version of you, your true self, your true authentic self. And as we go through life, we have these unresolved emotions. We go through these experiences, which we then create the ego. So the ego isn't really you. It's like this personality that's created in defense and a way to adapt to life, for you to actually survive. So my job is to help people to actually undo all of this conditioning and programming that they've received, so they can actually be themselves and they can actually be in control and choose to how to react to life rather than, so choose how to respond to life rather than unconsciously reacting to things and being stuck in these patterns.
Shane, I think that's a powerful intro, mate. Firstly, thank you very much for being so open and just, yeah, being honest, mate. It's absolutely amazing. There's obviously a lot of things that I was like relating to as well. And I think, as a female transformation coach, like I see a lot, I work with only women, and I see a lot of kind of anxiety with their clients which come on board sometimes. And I think, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, maybe societal expectations, all the rest of it. And that's another thing. But yeah, that what I think the biggest kicker there was that everybody can take away from this show is that you don't necessarily need to be like, as you say, really worried and kind of really like on edge. You can kind of suffer through anxiety on like various kind of levels, should we say. I mean, you'll obviously be able to explain more, but that's thank you very much for that, mate. If you can, just go into like, when you have some new anxiety, like how do you kind of initially, again, in generic terms, of course, because obviously we're not working with a client now, but how would you like initially break into the, should we say, coaching or treatment for that individual?
Well, you touched on something which I'll kind of cover briefly in terms of what anxiety actually is. So a lot of people, you know, these mental health labels is so, I hate labels, because you get this diagnosis from a doctor and it becomes almost a part of your identity. When really, if you actually understand what all mental health is basically just stress and understanding what stress is. So imagine that, say, for example, let's just really simplify things. You've got stress levels 0 to 10. When you're at 9, 10, when you're feeling overwhelmed, and your 9 out of 10 and my 9 out of 10, my 9 out of 10 may be different levels. It may be like this, because we have different capacities or tolerance of stress. But when you're on that 9, 10 out of 10, where we're feeling quite overwhelmed and above our ability to cope, that's when we feel anxious. So that's all anxiety is, when something is above our ability to actually deal with that thing. And what happens with depression is when we're at that kind of overwhelmed state, we're feeling anxious and overwhelmed for so long and nothing's being done, the nervous system kind of just goes into a freeze mode, it goes into shutdown, and this is what depression is. It's a way to conserve energy, it's a way to protect ourselves. So your body is so smart. If you're not taking conscious control, your body will just take over. And this is how most people are living life. They're living life just completely unconscious, just in their patterns, because they're just in survival mode. They're not actually thriving, they're not connecting themselves. And it makes it really hard to connect with other people when you're in those kind of modes as well. But in terms of when I'm working with clients, I've created my process so I only work with people that are ready to work, because to heal, you have to feel, you have to be willing to go into your feelings, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable, you have to be willing to prove yourself wrong, you have to be willing to challenge yourself, and it is quite a lot for people, and it is quite overwhelming. So there's essentially kind of two types of anxiety, really. This is kind of like you, and this is the problem. So say, for example, most of my one-to-one work is figuring out the specific patterns. So say, for example, when I had a client earlier where her pattern was whenever she thought of her boyfriend going to work or something, she always would think that he's going to cheat on her. She'd get really jealous. So that was the pattern, you know, and that was something that's maybe learned based on, you know, if we've been cheated on before and we've had these unresolved emotions, that stories are all going to be inside us, that energies will be inside us, and we're going to then project that onto our current reality. So that's where, say, for example, that's the issue, and we need to bring that thing down. So this is you, this is your problems. Now, when it's like this, you're going to feel anxious. My one-to-one work is about bringing your problem back down to reality, back to how it really is. But at the same time, people have a low self-esteem, or they have low confidence, or they have low resilience within themselves. So we also want to bring up somebody's resilience to actually kind of believe in themselves that they can actually do this work. So some clients, they're not actually ready to actually do the deeper shadow work, you know, we're actually kind of going deep into yourself and doing that kind of more intense work. But that's absolutely fine. So this is why I kind of create the Resilience Club, because it beefs up their nervous system, it builds up resilience, it allows them to connect to themselves, allows them to learn how to regulate the nervous system, learns those essential skills. So say, for example, if I said to you, Sam, if I said, right, let's go dive into your deepest, darkest caves of your soul and face your deepest traumas. Now, if I said that to you, most people go, oh, I don't know about that. you know. But if I'd sort of shown you how to connect with yourself, if I'd shown you how to, if you are kind of overwhelmed, how to bring yourself down, you would start feeling a little bit more confident in yourself, because you'd go, you know what, if I ever got overwhelmed, I know exactly how to bring myself back into alignment. I know exactly how to soothe myself, I know exactly how to feel safe with my body. And if you have that already, if you have that resilience that's built, then when I ask you, are you willing now to go into that cave? It's like you're going to that cave now with armor on, with a torch, with some weapons. Do you know what I mean? You know exactly how to approach it now. So sometimes it's just about kind of meeting a client where they are at their journey. And I've tried to create a process which covers all parts of their journey. So, you know, I've only learned this from making mistakes with people. So it's just something I've refined and refined over time.
Yeah, just nodding constantly, mate. I think that's absolutely awesome, mate. Like, a lot of stuff I can relate to there. And I think that what I really want to latch onto there is like the resilience word, because like, you know, when as a female coach, I talk to my clients a lot about, you know, hormonal metabolism, all the rest of it, but then looking at like stress resilience, because ultimately, if we manage to create more stress resilience over time, their nervous system can take more of a beating, should we say, without it kind of going into that sympathetic state too much. Which means, I mean, at my level, that means, okay, fat oxidation, which means fat burn, can occur so much easier. They genuinely feel more in control. They have less anxietal symptoms. And as a result, they can get the results they want, but also keep the results. I think, like, just hearing what you said there, like in how that applies to like my coaching as well, it's good to hear firstly I'm on the right track. That's firstly the right thing. But yeah, it's really cool to kind of hear how like the resilience thing is very much a real principle, if that makes sense. I like that. Do you, like, just out of interest, like, do you kind of track HRV at all with that sort of thing? Because I know I'm a big fan of HRV readings to kind of understand their nervous system standpoint. But do you do that, Shane? Yeah.
I used to kind of wear all the Fitbit stuff and track my heart rate variability and kind of experiment with things. And it all comes down to kind of strengthening your vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is like the 10th cranial nerve that runs from your brain all the way through your body, all the way to your gut. And what's actually not known, or people actually think your brain's the one in control. Actually, 80% of the information is sent from your body to your brain, and only 20% from your brain to your body. So it's more about kind of like being in your body and things like, you know, cold showers, the ice immersions, doing the breath work, doing the havening. All of these things will help strengthen your vagus nerve. Same like singing, chanting, all of these things will help develop it. And, you know, even though I was like a personal trainer for like 13 years, I'm probably in the best shape of my life now. And it's all down to these kind of stress management and resilience. So, you know, I was even thinking of maybe creating a program if people wanted to, like to kind of like work with personal trainers. So if you wanted to get in shape, like I'm pretty much shredded now with almost like minimum effort, because my stress levels are so low, and my body is just functioning optimally. And your breath is the most important thing. Like if I could say to anyone to change one thing in your life, learn how to fucking breathe. It will change everything in your life.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I'm always banging on about stress management and ultimately getting the nervous system to where we want it. The fact is, if your nervous system's managed better and your kind of stressful load, allostatic load is managed better, like you will be able to oxidize fat better at rest. Which I always say to people, look, if I can like train 1 hour a day, I've got 23 hours and I'm burning fat in them 23 hours, that sounds like a good deal to me. I'd rather burn fat then than in the training, you know? So that's absolutely spot on. Regarding like the, you know, the health, should we say the whole health is in general, should we say, like aerobic capacity, let's cover everything really. Aerobic capacity, like sleep, should we say rhythm and kind of health. Like how does all that kind of tie in like to the anxiety stuff for you on your end? You know, like health as a whole, sorry, in case that's not specific enough. I'm not too sure.
Well, anxiety in itself is when your needs aren't being met. So your body's basically just trying to speak to you. So the reason why people experience anxiety is because they're not connected to themselves. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not, you know, looking after their health. They're not looking after their sort of sleep. They're not eating right. But basically, your body's basically trying to go, hey, something's not right. You need to pay attention. You need to do something because something is not going on right now. And the more connected you are, the more you can actually then listen to your body. And when you're tuned to yourself, you can actually then respond to your body's whispers rather than having it scream at you, which is essentially what panic attacks are. We're feeling a certain way or something's not quite right and nothing's being done. So your nervous system's just kind of like putting down the accelerator even harder to try to encourage us to take action, but nothing's being done and we get more and more overwhelmed. But in terms of like your sleep is so important. Problem is, when people with anxiety, they find it very hard to fall asleep because they just have too much of that nervous system activation. And same with diet as well. If you don't have enough kind of vitamins and minerals, you're not getting enough kind of magnesium, if you're not performing optimally, a lot of people nowadays, they think healthy is not unhealthy. So a lot of people think just because you're not drinking alcohol every day and you're not eating, loads of chocolate and pizza and burgers every single day, they think they're healthy. But as you probably know, optimal health is like here. Most people's health is like down here. And the healthier you are, the more your abilities, you're more tolerant your body is to be able to deal with stress. So it does massively play into your kind of resilience factor, how well nourished you are, how much sleep you're getting, how much rest you're getting. These are all very, very easy wins that people can have to improve their mental health, their anxiety, even exercise. If I didn't exercise, I'd be losing my mind in this lockdown. Like, honestly, like I hate kind of home workouts, but I've had to kind of make it work because honestly, if I didn't train, I would literally lose my mind or kill whoever's closest to me,
No, I get it, mate. I get it. I get the training thing. I love the whole health kind of the way I like to kind of explain my coaching, and I'd imagine you're on the exact same level, is like holistic with a W, like a holistic approach to things where all angles are covered. I think sometimes, like from my end anyways, as a coach, is I can sometimes see a lot of people, a lot of females come to me to get in shape, but they end up kind of basically come to me with more anxiety from other personal trainers, because some PTs just trying to trash people, right? Like, you'll see this yourself. Some people like go hard, go home mentality. And I think like when you approach somebody with that, it kind of puts them into a corner where it's like, okay, it's my way or no way, and you're either going to be a failure or you're not. And that straight away for anxiety is just going to be absolutely completely detrimental to any development of the individual. And I think like, for me, having a holistic approach is genuinely very important to make sure we can ultimately get somebody to where they need to go. On your end, of course, to recover, or not necessarily recover, I don't know if that's the right term, maybe just manage and control. Maybe that's a better term. But for me, to ultimately get in shape and stay in shape, it's kind of good that I can kind of hear a lot of similarities between us here in terms of our coaching methods, which is quite cool. I think what's I did actually forget, and I want to pull it back a little bit, when you mentioned breathing, like learn how to fucking breathe. That's such a big thing, right? Like, if you are sympathetically driven, if you're in that fight or flight state, the fact is that you're going to be hyperventilating somewhat to some degree, right? And like, as you breathe more, if you breathe correctly, simply put, oxygen is needed firstly to fuel the brain effectively, to get nutrients to it, which it needs to have, but also to cleave off fat molecules and actually drive fat to where it needs to go. That's needed too. I think it's really, really cool to like hear this, because sometimes I can like talk about this stuff, but as a PT, a coach who just looks at fat loss, typically it's like to hear it from your end is really actually quite cool. It's quite powerful.
Well, a lot of people that
it's
struggle
awesome,
to lose weight.
I want to just talk about, like, I've written a little note here, like I was writing it down as we were talking. What effect, like from your end now, like I just kind of spoke about it a little bit, but what effect does anxiety have on the body and its kind of development in terms of getting results? So if you were looking at, say, muscle definition, gain, some hypertrophy, or fat loss, like what effects would anxiety have on that as a result?
I mean, one of the main effects it's going to have is if you're not self-soothing, if you're not regulating your nervous system, being attuned to yourself, your body's going to take on subconscious patterns, which for many people, the way they comfort themselves soothe is through food, through emotional eating. Especially now, we've locked down, we've got nowhere to go, we've got our cupboards, our kitchen's literally there. How many times I used to, when I was younger, sort of like be putting the cupboards open like the 10th time, wondering if something's magically appeared, through either boredom, but it's a way to kind of regulate our nervous system. And You know, these patterns can even be from, you know, when we're born, and then we're being held by a mother, we're getting breastfed, we've got that focused attention, we're getting that nurture, we're getting that love. From a very, very early age, we've associated food with love, with connection, with safety. So when we're feeling a bit overwhelmed, when we're feeling stressed and we don't even recognize how we're feeling, this is often why people will self-soothe with food, with drink, with drugs, or whatever. Just understanding that every pattern that you have, every behavior you have, every response you have, always has a good intention behind it. And then if you're chronically stressed all the time, your body's not going to sort of be rested. You're going to find it a lot harder to build muscle. You're going to find it harder to lose fat, because a lot of times people will find it a lot harder to lose fat, especially around their midsection. And if you're actually depressed, your metabolism slows down. Like, your body's literally going into conservation mode. So I've actually, you know, years and years ago, I'd worked with clients where you'd be like, they must be lying to me, you know, because, you know, that you see their food and you think they're hardly eating anything, they're smashing every single workout, and something's not working. Now, the reason often why this is because their body is in such a state of depression and shut down. Their metabolism is so slow, their energy efficiency is come to a halt. They're lethargic, they're tired, their body's not performing optimally. And not only that, they're typically chronic overbreathers. So if you used to measure your breaths of how many breath cycles you do, so breathe in, breathe out, that's one cycle. If you measure your breaths per minute, average is about 8 to 12. I guarantee those people that are struggling with their weight, they'll be breathing about 15 breaths per minute. Guarantee it, every single time. Your breath is energy. If you're over breathing, you're over consuming energy. And, you know, they can't put science to it in terms of say that this is like a calorie intake, but if you're over breathing, I guarantee your body's having too much energy in its system. And where it's so shut down, you're going to find it very, very hard to lose weight until you work on your nervous system and actually deal with the stress levels.
Like that. Sorry, nearly coughed. Yeah, like that, mate. Yeah, I think one big takeaway for anybody listening, and, you know, women and men alike, ultimately, if you are in a stressful state and you're not managing stresses, and that can be, you know, anything from an alarm clock to simply you don't like your bloody job, or you don't like your partner, like, there's so many stresses that we have as humans these days, right? Like, we wake up to an alarm, we literally inhale food, we don't even eat it and chew it these days, we just literally breathe it in. We absolutely smash ourselves in like HIIT training and stuff. And, you know, you've got toxic environments, toxic friendships, toxic communities. And I think notifications going off on your phone is a massive one for me. Like, how many bloody notifications have you probably had also being on this show right now? It's ridiculous. And when you have that compounded with a genuine kind of like state of anxiety, that is just that. I've seen clients eating like near like 1,200, 1,300 calories. And I used to be just like, as you said, like, you must be lying to me. There's no way you're eating that. You're like 100 kg. It can't be right. And then you look at the lifestyle, and actually we're just hyper stressed. And it's like, shit, okay, well, this person actually needs maybe more support here, a better quality of coaching, in my opinion. But yeah, it's brilliant to hear that. I mean, just to put it in black and white for people from yourself, Shane, because I saw a quick question there. I think it was from Fran, actually. Let's just run through that one real quick. Can being in a constant state of anxiety impact fat loss and not seeing results?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's all a mental game. As anyone that knows how to lose weight, it is a mental game. I remember when I've kind of, the first kind of like shows and stuff that I used to do, I'd be so stressed out. Like, I remember my girlfriend at the time, she'd cook me a meal. If I didn't know how much it weighed and stuff, I'd be like, I can't eat it. And I'd be so stressed out, and it's absolutely insane. And the funny thing is now I'm pretty much almost eating anything I want to obviously within reason. And I'm probably leaner than I've ever been. And I'm surprised. Like, I'm surprised at how kind of lean I am with the minimum effort, but I can only put it down to just being so relaxed and being regulated myself and not being so overwhelmed. If you can, I mean, the mind-body connection is, they're not separate. They're so connected with each other. If you're not kind of like managing your stress and your emotions, because a lot of people feel like, you know, if I say mental health, people get a little bit like, oh, mental health, I don't have that. But if I say emotional health, you know, do you have an issue? Do you have a pattern of emotions that you find hard with? Everybody's going to say yes. You know, everybody feels an emotional sort of way. And if you don't feel your emotions, you probably even have even more problems because you're disconnected from yourself more than anything else. But yeah, if you're not taking care, if you don't have healthy ways to regulate your nervous system, if you don't have healthy coping strategies to actually deal with your stress levels, then yeah, you're going to struggle, because life is super fucking stressful right now for everyone in the world. And then we're going to end up sort of moving towards food, drink, drugs, sex, porn, anything that we can to basically make ourselves feel better, which understandably we have to have compassion for ourselves for having a good intention of trying to make ourselves feel better. But if you're not doing anything which is healthy for you, then you're going to run into problems, because you're not going to be able to achieve your goal when you have all these subconscious patterns, because this is where we have self-sabotage. This is where we have this conflict. You know, imagine if you had a goal and you was like, you know what, I want to get in shape, I want to lose weight. That's your rational adult conscious mind. Now, the reason why people self-sabotage and all these obstacles come up is because of their subconscious patterns that they have, which is basically trying to make themselves feel better, or make themselves feel comforted or safe, which you don't even recognize that you're doing. It happens unconsciously. This is why sometimes people are having that inner battle. They'll eat like a whole pack of biscuits, and they'll be like, oh my God, what have I done? All the guilt, all the shame, and then the cycle continues. And then we keep doing this. And this is why people are in a constant cycle of self-sabotage, and they find it very hard to achieve their goals that they want to achieve.
Powerful, mate. I literally picked up one thing there, and I want to pull out again, because it's just like rabbit holes. You talk about one thing, you go in, don't you? But I think you'll definitely agree with this. Like you mentioned several times, you know, habits and kind of mental cues, and basically, like, you know, lots of different responses we have. And I think the simplest habit loop I've ever seen was literally like contextual cue, reward, and then repetition, I believe. And it was quite literally just, you know, something happens, you have an action or a reward, and then it just becomes a routine over time. And with your clients, of course, and mine alike, when it comes to getting in shape and staying in shape, or for your clients, of course, like managing their reactions, should we say, and their kind of thought process in many respects too, like, is it fair to say, if you are in a stress state, that it's far harder to inoculate these kind of patterns and the behaviors that you want to have long term, that ultimately the opposite of what you're currently doing? So if somebody was always to gravitate towards food, as you said, and maybe chocolates or some sort, as a reward center hit for the obviously brain, and they're like looking forward to that as a sense of comfort, it's, if they're in an anxiety driven state and something that's quite detrimental, like, is it fair to say it's going to be very, very hard to break those habits and inoculate good habits instead? Because if we're looking for that reward center response and hit, we could replace it with something else, right? But ultimately, it's very hard to if they're already in that anxiety driven state, right? Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the issue that people have, because they do a lot of the kind of top down work. So things like CBT, talk therapy, psychotherapy, all this counseling sort of thing, it's all top down therapy, which means you're working on your conscious mind with your conscious actions and your adult self. So when you're regulated, when you're feeling aligned with yourself, you're feeling okay, you're not too overwhelmed, your conscious mind is still working. So you can still battle your subconscious to a degree, but your conscious mind can only focus on so many things at once. Your subconscious is so much more powerful. You can work on so many other things at the same time. And it has unlimited resources, essentially, because it doesn't require your conscious effort and conscious energy. Now, when we're activated, when we're triggered, whether it's an emotional response or, you know, a stress response that we have, the prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking brain, switches off, essentially. So you have no ability to actually be in control of yourself, and you find yourself doing these things. So with anything that somebody is what somebody calls a pattern. So the response may be kind of overeating or emotional eating. The trigger may be whatever that trigger is for that person. They could have many different triggers. But if we can explore the trigger, explore the root of it, change it, and heal the emotional stuckness or energy that's still in the body that's creating this pattern, when you heal that, then you don't need that same strategy. So you don't have to keep using that conscious energy where you're like, oh, I'm constantly battling myself. And this is what people do. They have all these unconscious patterns which they're unaware of. They start these kind of goals or these kind of things that they want to work towards. They're putting in this conscious energy, but that you can only do for so long. Eventually, you're going to get overwhelmed. Stress is, life gets on top of you. We get stressed, and then we let go of that, and then all the patterns come back again. And this is where we kind of make mistakes, where we kind of like fall off the diet. It's where we struggle and we kind of have these setbacks. But until you work on your unconscious or your subconscious patterns, you're just going to keep repeating back to that same thing. And the same way that, especially like with self-image as well, like I could be, you know, looking in amazing shape sort of now and you know, diet down, anything like that. If my internal image of myself is still this overweight fat kid when he was 14, I'm never going to be able to see the external me. I'm only going to see the internal me. So it's always about kind of changing your inner reality if you want to change your outer reality. You can do all this stuff you want, all this conscious focus on changing your outer reality. If you've got that inner reality that's counteracting that or conflicting it, you're always going to sort of have that inner conflict and you're always going to self-sabotage. So if you actually want to achieve what you want to do, you have to go inwards and do the inner work.
I love that, mate. I love that. I always use an example with my clients on that level, which is I used to be a paratrooper, and I always use an example that when the shit hits the fan, like typically you've got the guy who's run ragged and he's just all over the shop and he's just scrambling everywhere. But you've got the other guy who's just kind of cool as a cucumber and he's very collected. And I always say, look, the thing is they're both in the same scenario, but it's the perception of that basically event which has changed their reality. And ultimately that's going to change their biochemistry, their brain chemistry off the back of that, and their ability to act logically from that moment onwards. And I think that's like, yeah, it's good, powerful, mate. It's awesome. What like on this here? So you know, you spoke about going from the top-down approach and typically going straight into the conscious level, right? When it comes to the subconscious level and unconscious level to some degree too, like, would we? I mean, of course, I think I know the answer anyway. I think so. But if we were to apply sound nutritional protocols and training protocols here too, that would obviously only benefit the person like suffering from anxiety and whatever else too, right? I'm assuming that's the case.
I don't understand the question. Sorry.
Sorry. So what I mean saying is, like, if we were to, as you said, if somebody goes in with like a CBT method, or I don't know, taking supplements or whatever, it's kind of like putting a plaster on a bullet wound, right? Yes. Whereas if we were to apply protocols from yourself, apply sound nutritional protocols, sound training protocols, that ultimately becomes the holistic approach we're after, really, right? That would be considered the holy grail from what I can see anyway. Or is there something missing from that?
Well, it's understanding what we really need is a bottom-up approach. So like with anything, it grows bottom-up. You plant the seed, it grows bottom-up. You know, anything grows from the bottom. Nothing grows top-down. It's just not how things work. So in terms of like understanding in terms of evolution, the most primal part of our brain, the brain stem, you know, where we kind of like focus on all our kind of like survival mechanisms, our safety, that's built into pretty much every single animal. You know, that survival instinct, that has to be priority, the oldest part of our brain. Then we've got the kind of the limbic system, the kind of emotional center of the brain as well, which is kind of like the fear as well, or at least the survival response. And then we've got the rational thinking. So if we know that your rational thinking brain is slow and your limbic system is fast because it's survival, if we was both in a cave and, you know, thousands of years ago, because our brains haven't really changed that much since then, if a saber-toothed tiger jumped in and you was in your limbic system, you'd already go into fight or flight, you'd be gone. If I stayed in my prefrontal cortex, I'd be going, shit, there's a saber-toothed tiger there. Oh my God, I need to run. Where's the exit? I'm dead. It's too slow. So our amygdala always has priority over our irrational conscious mind. So when we feel anxious, we feel overwhelmed, that conscious mind, the rational part of your brain switches off, because we know that anxiety is anything but rational. That's why you can know you're safe and know you're like, you know what, I know I'm okay, but your body's still freaking out. So we have to work bottom up. So we have to work with the body, and we have to create safety first. So we create safety not by telling the body, but by showing the body. So matching the physiology of when we do feel safe, doing things like breath work, slowing down your breathing into your belly, activating your diaphragm, doing all these things, and havening, self-soothing. What we're doing is we're communicating to the body that the body's safe. So it's a bit like if I was your body and I was trying to speak to you, if I had to give you this message, but if we didn't feel safe, it's like the panic alarm's going off. So imagine there's a panic alarm in the background of me right now, and all you can hear is a siren. I'm trying to speak to you, and you're like, "What? I can't hear. All I can hear is fucking terror. All I can hear is the panic alarm going off." So for me to be able to actually communicate to you effectively, the first thing that needs to happen is I first need to turn off that panic alarm. So once you create safety in the body, once the body knows it's safe, then it can then process the emotions. It can actually convey the message. Once it's processed the emotions, then your rational brain actually switches back on again, because we've calmed the amygdala down. The amygdala's actually kind of like calmed down now. So when the amygdala calms down, that's when your rational thinking brain comes back online. And that's the same reason why I don't have to give my clients advice. I'm not telling them how to live their life. I'm not giving them any advice. All I do to help guide them into themselves to actually create that safety. And as soon as we go through the process, they all have their own answers. They're the experts on them. They get all the closure, all the ideas, all the understanding that they need, but only after they've created safety and processed the emotions. You can't change your thoughts to change your feelings. It's impossible.
I love that. I love that, mate. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that last part, I was just going to say, like, ultimately, the nervous system, when it jacks up to one side or the other, like sympathetic or parasympathetic or even anything else, really what we're looking at there is like, it's just a surge of hormones and neurotransmitters. And ultimately, when we look at it at that level, like on my end as a coach, like who helps people ultimately get in shape, it allows me to break that down and say, okay, so now we know the hormone implications of this and the kind of neurotransmitter implications, all the rest of it. We can then start to kind of find little bottlenecks in their kind of biochemistry and their brain chemistry, ultimately to support that better, right? I think that's kind of like a really key takeaway from this, is that ultimately, like, it is a perception-driven thing, it is a habit, a behavior-driven thing, and it comes from the individual. You know, it comes from the individual managing that, but firstly understanding it, I think, is the key part. I think there's a huge lack of understanding around anxiety and even, depression and all the rest. Any mental health or even emotional health condition in your terms, of course. I think there's a huge lack of understanding of what it actually is. And then with that comes a lack of sound practices to carry out and help people. I think that's, yeah, I think it's awesome, mate. I really do. I think everything you said today has been top notch.
Well, if you understand neurotransmitters and you want to understand like supplementation, you may have heard that acetylcholine used to be called vagus stuff when it was first discovered. So acetylcholine is produced by the vagus nerve, and if your vagus nerve isn't functioning, you're probably not producing much acetylcholine. So you can actually take supplements. I did actually create a supplement list of things like CDP choline, huperzine, all these other things that help increase your ability or your body's ability to produce acetylcholine. And this will actually make you feel a lot calmer, a bit more connected, and almost give that vagus nerve a little bit of a boost or a bit of a rest even. And I did find it does lower people's anxiety levels through that supplementation. So it's just it's one thing that I've not really seen spoken much about. But the fact that, acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that we need sometimes for concentration. Sometimes it's why when people feel stressed and anxious, they can't concentrate, they can't think, their memory's terrible. For us to actually learn and actually engage our brain, we have to feel safe. We have to be in that ventral vagal system of safety and connection.
I think this is a huge untapped area, though, right? Not just in like our industries, but across really every industry to do with health. Like, this is a huge untapped area. Like, as a PT, with PTs, as you know, always bang on about bloody protein. Like, you must have enough protein. But for me, it's like I always remember for some reason the most clear kind of amino acid was always tryptophan. Like, if we can get that to ultimately pass through the blood-brain barrier, get synthesized into 5-HTP, that and ultimately help that individual sleep better, but also manage their dopamine much more effectively, which ultimately makes them, well, less anxietal straight away, more focused, should we say, more on that kind of conscious level, in control, and manage the perception better. I think this is like, that's awesome to hear you talk about it, mate, because yeah, I've not really ever heard anybody else talk about things on this level, especially in relation to body composition, to ultimately losing fat and gaining tissue. I've never really heard that before from anybody else.
Somebody said, is that what in doctors prescribed anxiety medication? No. So they're not, they're typically giving you pharmaceutical drugs to either slow your heart rate down, to not have you sort of panic so much, or with SSRIs, they're kind of trying to micromanage your serotonin intake. But at the same time, it's like taking a painkiller for gunshot wounds, but you're still bleeding all over the place. It may treat the symptom, but it's not really fixing the actual problem. You still have to kind of focus on the root cause things. So, you know, if you are kind of feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious and you want something to take, you'd be probably better off sorting out your nutrition, sorting out your sleep, taking things like magnesium. CBD can help. Things like ashwagandha, certain cortisol modulators can help. They call them kind of adaptogens. They can help too. And also the things that help improve your acetylcholine. So they're all kind of ways that you can help improve your body's natural way to just be healthy, because we forget that health isn't our natural default state. So if we're not healthy, we need to do something to optimize our health, because that's what we would be if we was completely, you know, if all things were in line, if we're taking care of ourselves.
Spot on, mate. I love that line. Health is, yeah, like our baseline, isn't it? Exactly that. Advice on the adaptogens, anybody listening. So ashwagandha, I typically will prescribe that. Say prescribe like my doctor. Don't call me a doctor. We'll cut that part out. So I often advise ashwagandha and cordyceps together, because adaptogens, as you know, obviously manage the nervous system state, will help anyway somewhat, but they typically, some of them have like a unique property, and what I found with ashwagandha is it actually has a positive effect on thyroid conversion. When we have that, naturally, as you'll know with the thyroid now, if that's, well, better more effective, then that's naturally going to help with brain chemistry too off the back of that. Cordyceps, what I find is that helps a lot with oxygen uptake. So when it comes to the breathing drills we mentioned earlier, I think both of them together, from my experience, that's been like the holy grail of adaptogens. Unless there's some reason why we wouldn't take them, I'm not sure. But yeah, really cool. Really, really cool stuff. I like how, you know, you spoke about doctors that are doing their thing, and I don't like to play doctor too much because it's a very dangerous game. You can get in a lot of trouble, you know, but I think it's fair to say GPs are general practitioners because they are general. You know, when we go into detail, especially on this level, they don't, in my opinion, they don't really, maybe it's a lack of care. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's overwork because the NHS is under a severe amount of stress. It's probably a bit of both. But ultimately, there's a lack of knowledge there, I think, and awareness, and actually what is going on with the individual in front of them. And I think, would you agree with this, Shane, as well? Like, when somebody's actually trying to get in shape and is you know, exercising, is eating better, and all this, most of the literature from what I'm seeing from GPs is that actually it's from people who are just sedentary, like people who kind of don't necessarily exercise regularly, don't do a lot of what we would do naturally as PTs. So it kind of voids a lot of that literature, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's understanding like things in scientific settings and real world kind of examples don't always correlate, because you can't mimic real life as such in controlled environments. And like you said, most of them are done on sedentary individuals where their main focus is controlling their calorie intake, which if you're in hospital, very easy to do. If you're in the free world, dealing with life and your stresses and your job and your kids and whatnot, a lot harder to do. So it's actually understanding how your body works and functions in the real world, and learning how to actually optimize health versus focusing on losing weight. When your body's optimally working, your body will naturally be in tune with yourself, and you're so attuned to yourself, you won't be overeating. I remember before where, you know, I'd have a cheat meal with my girlfriend at the time, and we'd both eat a double XL pizza each. We'd get sides. We'd eat a whole tub of Ben and Jerry's and a cookie. And yeah, I probably had a bit of an eating disorder at the time, to be fair, with all the kind of binge and diet cycles. But now, like, I'll eat a medium or half, you know, not even a medium pizza. My body's telling me I've had enough. You obviously understand with all the things with the leptin and the kind of hunger signals. But when your body's optimal, you would be listening to your body, be attuned to yourself, and you won't be able to overeat because your body be literally saying, you've had enough, you know?
Would you say, though, at the same time, that's probably because you're far more aware of your actual eating habits? Like, if you're in a stress state, like I always imagine a dog, right? If a dog's stressed and it's eating, it will literally inhale that food fast. It will just scoff it down real quick, and then probably have the shits about fucking 24 hours later. It's just what dogs are like. But if you're actually more present with your food, you take your time to actually chew it and masticate it, you're going to get fuller much quicker, but also absorb them nutrients far better. So from a brain chemistry standpoint, from a composition standpoint, losing fat and all the rest of it, that's only going to be beneficial on every level. I think that's probably a big kicker there, right, Shane?
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the word present. When you're actually living consciously and you're actually being aware of how you're feeling, you're connected to yourself, you're actually in that moment, you're chewing your food, you're enjoying it, you're smelling it, you're tasting your food, you're noticing when your body, how your body feels as you're eating it. You'll notice, oh, your body says eventually, oh, we've had enough now. But we've been so conditioned. I mean, how many people watching this growing up was a good boy or a good girl if they finished all the food on their plate, or they weren't allowed to have dessert or sweets unless they finished all of the food on the plate. And we've conditioned ourselves that we have to finish the plate and to not listen to our body, rather than actually tune to ourselves and actually go, because kids do this naturally. Kids do this naturally where they'll kind of eat half their meal and go, I don't want any food anymore. But they may be hungry 2 hours later. Naturally, we're very attuned to ourselves, but we brainwash and we condition ourselves to basically follow these rules or this conditioning that maybe our parents learned from their parents, and we're just constantly just passing on these things. But yeah, the more present you are, the more connected to yourself, the more in control you are of your life, because you're not, living life unconsciously. For a long time, I spent my life where I'm like, oh my God, the last 3 years have disappeared. And I honestly couldn't really even tell you what was going on in my life, because I was just so focused on all these other things rather than actually being connected to me or connected to the present moment, that we just become disillusioned. And that's the issue that, the problem with today's world. We just become so disconnected from ourselves and from the present. We're always kind of living in the past or focusing on the future sort of thing. We're never actually present with ourselves, and that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, I think that sums a lot of it up. I mean, if people were more present and less, you know, less emotionally given to things which actually doesn't affect their life positively, doesn't add value to them, I think that it would fix a lot of things. I really do. I think from a female standpoint, for me, I see a lot of women come to me with societal expectations been placed on them for years and decades in some cases, and they've always dieted or always I don't know. There's been various behavioural issues I've seen, and ultimately, it's like if someone was present and kind of let go of the things which didn't actually matter so much, and was very much in control of their kind of impulses, should we say, and their behaviours, as we kind of spoke about throughout this whole show, I think that would fix a lot of stuff straight away. And I think like the present regarding food, and Amy actually said the other day, I think I spoke to Amy, if you know Amy, Shane knows Amy, for anybody who didn't know by now. She said about meditation, I said it was like, I think letting go is what, and it was actually wrong. She said, it's actually not that, it's about being present. And straight away I was like, wow, that's actually it. It's quite literally being present and things. And she used an analogy, I think, of cars going by. And it's okay if the cars go by, just watch them. You don't have to interact with them, they're just there. It's just being present with the cars as such. And I was like, that just blew my mind. It was like that moment of clarity there. Meditation was super key. Yeah, I mean, meditation, by the way, Shane, like, do you advise a lot of people do that? Because what I want to ask you really is like, look, for people who are suffering with anxiety now, like, what could we do straight away? Like, what could they just implement on their own? Like a couple, like, little tips, what they could do straight away just to help them in the moment now.
Cutting out caffeine is an easy win. A lot of people just consuming caffeine. So if you think anxiety is just overactivity of your nervous system, too much energy is going to make you more anxious. You mostly want to kind of lower the energy. So connect to our breath, meditation, but anything can be meditation. Eating my food can be meditation. If I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my food, I'm noticing how it smells, I'm noticing the textures in my mouth, I'm noticing the different flavors that I can taste, I'm feeling the warmth of the temperature of the food as it goes down my throat. All of these different things, you can do that, or you can sit there watching TV and, you don't even know what you've eaten. We're so disconnected. So when we actually connect to our food, one, you're going to enjoy your food a lot more. You're actually going to actually be present and actually go, you know what, I actually really enjoyed that meal. So you can actually have more fulfillment from it. But you're actually going to be more connected to yourself and actually then notice if you're feeling a bit bloated with some foods, or some foods are kind of causing you overeat. But in terms of actually dealing with anxiety, you want to learn how to regulate the nervous system. The easiest way is through touch. Touch is the most basic form of communication that we have. Most communication is non-verbal. When you stroke your kind of like your face, your upper arms, your hands, it creates delta waves in your brain. These are the slowest brainwaves that your brain produces. Typically, you only produce them in your deepest level of sleep. And if you're anxious, you probably never go into that deep level of sleep anyway. This is where we recover, we rest, and we have deep restorative healing powers with this delta brainwaves. But doing that can slow your brainwaves down. So typically when people are anxious, they're in gamma or beta brainwaves, which are very, very fast. You want to slow the brainwaves down. We can also slow down your breathing cycles by breathing less and by kind of like slowly, when you breathe in, your sympathetic activation happens, and when you breathe out, your parasympathetic activation happens. So we want to slow down the exhale. You can make a small opening of your mouth, so you breathe in, small opening of your mouth. So you want to slow it down as much as you can. The slower your breath on the exhale, the more your body will start to calm down. They're the two easiest ways. And basically anything which brings you into the present moment. I go for walks. I go for walks in nature. I notice the sound of the trees, the smells, the feeling of the breeze on my face, the feeling of the floor underneath my feet, you know, how my body feels when I'm moving. Anything where you're being present, things like yoga, anything brings into your body, movement, music, dance, anything which brings yourself into the present moment where you're just in that kind of that flow state. You know, anything like that is going to be great for you to just connect with yourself, be present. And the more you connect to yourself, the less anxious you're going to be. And it's just a case of then with everything else, working through the programming and the patterns that you have. So if you picked up this belief at some point in your life that you're not good enough, you could, you know, have the most richest success and have the perfect body and the perfect relationship like that. None of that stuff's going to change the subconscious belief that you have. You have to do the inner work to then break that. And what we realize, most of the things that we're actually chasing in life is to nurture ourselves in a way to kind of heal our wounds. But most people will chase all those things, and it's typically the people that have chased it, failed, and recognized and woke up and realized, wow, there's something deeper to this, that I need to do something else. And this is where often where people have these spiritual awakenings, because they're realizing all the things that they've been chasing. It leaves them kind of just not feeling connected to themselves and not really kind of feeling it.
Shane, that's amazing, mate. Honestly, genuinely top notch there, mate. That's absolutely brilliant. The breathing, just to confirm, when we breathe in, that is naturally sympathetic, am I right? And when you breathe out, it's naturally parasympathetic, and that's why you would naturally exhale much slower to drive more parasympathetic state, right?
Yeah, so when we breathe in, we activate sympathetic, and when we breathe out, parasympathetic. So we want to, when we have longer in the exhale, so if I breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds, I'm putting my brakes on. So I'm putting the brakes on the energy systems. So most people slam down to the floor, they're thinking consciously, so they're thinking all the time, they're always stressed out, they're always busy, busy, busy. We need to practice and learn how to be, how to connect with ourselves, how to slow down and put on the brakes of the nervous system. The more we can put on the brakes, the less we're going to have to use the handbrakes. So otherwise, if you've got a Ferrari, but you've got no brakes, you are not even going to be able to go 10 miles an hour without crashing your car. So if you don't know how to slow down your nervous system, even with a little bit of stress, you're not going to know how to actually bring yourself back into alignment where you can actually manage more stress. So I'm not saying, you know, just meditate and, you know, all these things go away. It actually enables your nervous system to actually become more resilient so you can handle more stress. You just become more efficient with taking care of yourself, you know?
I think in that last part there, in terms of for my clients and ladies who work with me, if you can handle more stress, guys, like, look, you can train harder, you can do more HIIT classes, more the things you enjoy, get away from things that you might consider boring maybe and less enjoyable. And
I mean,
then we look at other stresses too, right? Oh, there you go. You got a lovely. Then you've got you know, digestive stresses. So therefore, we can even look at more metabolic flexibility and having more flexibility of diet. Ultimately, meaning that you can live life on your terms in many respects and stay in brilliant shape. And that's why, like, for me, I would love to, this is why I invited you on the show, Shane, because it's such a holistic approach on things which we need on my level to get people in great shape and keep them there. And that's yeah, amazing, mate. It's actually funny you said you can meditate doing anything, because I always get nervous on these shows, always, like literally all the time, and I can literally feel myself kind of with nervous energy. And it's when you're talking about you can meditate kind of at any point doing anything, I instantly just try to just kind of hold my breathing a bit more, control that a bit better, and actually feel a little bit better for that. Feel a little bit less jittery.
if in doubt, breathe in, breathe out. So just being conscious of your breathing. So what's happening when we're feeling anxious? The body's trying to get you to take action. It's that mobilized energy to try and go, oh, just do something. But often there's nothing to actually do. But when we're actually focused on, oh, I know what I can do. I can breathe. You know, we need to always breathe. So I just breathe in, breathe out. And if you can, breathe into your belly. And if you're doing that, because most people don't realize that the short, shallow breathing to the chest, or they're holding their breath. I do this all the time. Like my abs get tense because I'm like almost doing this. Sometimes if I feel stressed, I'm typically someone that kind of tenses up. So for me, breathing into my belly reminds me to relax my belly. If in doubt, just breathe in, breathe out. And if in terms of your talking, what you can do is extend the words that you say before you next take an in-breath. So I can exaggerate it now and slow my words down, but at the same time, really extend it before I have to finally take a breath out. And I'll take a breath. Because what I'm doing is, as I'm talking, until I take that next breath in, I'm in that passive activation. So I can take that breath in and keep talking, talk, until I finally need that breath in. I can then take that breath in again and go again.
Love that, mate. Love that. Thank you. It's absolutely been amazing. Even you talk about this all, mate. It's been genuinely very insightful. All I want to ask, like, kind of final question from me, mate, is for like the ladies who come to me to obviously get in shape and, you know, better their composition, better their health. Is there a difference from what you know of that? Well, between males and females, is there a difference? I mean, away from societal expectation and stuff, which I think we can agree is the thing with females. Is there a brain chemistry difference and a way we would potentially train somebody different with the male or female?
In terms of training?
Just well, yeah, I mean, in terms of training, nutrition protocols from my end, of course, but from your end, the way you would treat somebody too, the way you would help somebody and coach somebody.
No, the way it's the same, male or female. Typically, women are more open to their emotions, so they're typically more used to and comfortable going into their feelings. Guys have been conditioned to basically suppress themselves. So we've been conditioned to disconnect from ourselves from day one, almost, you know. So imagine if you disconnect from yourself from day one, you're probably gonna have a lot more unresolved issues than typically someone who's expressing their emotions a lot more often. But then they're more aware of their problems, maybe. So people that are kind of disconnected from themselves, they don't realize they have problems because it's not become apparent, but you can only suppress your emotions for so long. Everybody has like an emotional tank. You can get away with that for a while, but you know, typically in your 30s or 40s, when that shit starts to accumulate, that's when we feel overwhelmed. Or say, for example, with lockdown, our stress bucket got so full, all our stuff started spilling out. All our kind of unresolved issues, our traumas, our unresolved patterns, they started really spinning out. And that's what's naturally going to happen until you work for your stuff.
Amazing, Shane. Amazing. I want to go one more on that. I said it was the last question. Hopefully you're not in a rush, mate. Final question. So I know from a coaching standpoint that if a female typically has more estrogenic symptoms, like far more estrogen going on, it does tend to create a lot more mental chatter and like gut instinct is what I call it. Have you found that yourself? And I mean, if there was, because I can sometimes apply, again, this is when we can fine tune things, not up front for anybody listening, but when it's time to fine tune stuff from a nutrition and training standpoint, if we were to apply things which could potentially help buffer out those estrogenic effects, would that be beneficial for anxiety and all the rest of it?
Hard for me to comment. You know, I honestly don't know. Typically when people, say for example, if a woman is closer to her kind of like cycle, when she's kind of, she's going to be more stressed just because of all the extra estrogen and progesterone, anything like that. She's going to feel more likely to go into her kind of subconscious patterns. It's where people typically would then start kind of comfort eating or overeating sort of things, just because they're just, it's overwhelming for your body. It's still a stressful thing, and you're not going to be as connected to your kind of conscious mind as you are when you're sort of not sort of pre-cycle. But honestly, I can't really answer that question with enough information I have.
No, it's brilliant, Shane. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much for coming on. It's genuinely been probably one of my favourite shows that I've done. It's been amazing, mate. Thank you. We'd want to just tell us where people can find you, you know, because this will be a podcast and all that good stuff too. So tell people where they can find you, where they can kind of find out more about you, your services and all the rest of it, mate. That'd be brilliant.
Most of my stuff's on Instagram at Anxiety Specialist. So if you just kind of follow me on there. I try and put out as much content as I can, and then you can just find out all the stuff that I have to offer from there as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Shane, mate. If you're happy to, I'll cut the show a little bit early, but we'll just run through some questions if you can. Not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah? I mean, I'm not sure what we got. Bloody hell, there's loads of messages there. Shane, are yours as popular, mate? Let's see what there is. Can you see any of your end, Shane, mate? I'm not sure you can pull any out. Yeah, from Anika. What causes caffeine sensitivity? I can't sleep from the caffeine in tea.
It can be actually genetics. If you do sort of DNA testing, it can actually show you that some people have more sensitivity to caffeine. But typically, if your nervous system isn't very well regulated, imagine it's an example like thinking of a muscle. If I just was in that sympathetic activation forever, it's like me going to the gym and never stop training. You know, so how people live their lives. That muscle is going to be so knackered and atrophied and sort of destroyed. It's going to be so weak it can't handle any training. This is kind of like what people have become with their nervous system in terms of dealing with stress. Actually dealing with any activation of the nervous system gets so overwhelming that any activation is just now overwhelming. You know, this is what happens. So we want to practice going into our rest mode, giving that a rest, actually allowing your nervous system to recover. And over time, you can actually build more tolerance to it. So like now caffeine doesn't really bother me, but before it could give me anxiety.
I love that, mate. I always use the analogy of if you were a leg press, I mean, just because I'm a PT, gym terms, if you were a leg press and you had to hold, it's a pretty hard position to be in, to hold a lot of weight on that leg press all day. So if we instead then can limit the weight to 200 kg, that's stress management. And now if we manage to deload that 200 kg at the end of the day, that's deloading stress. And over time, when you do that, if we can put like a number to stress, like say an argument with a partner, if we could put a number to that and that causes 1 unit of stress when you're stress resilient, that's great. That's not going to really do much. But up front, when you're just starting out in your journey, that same event could cause 100 units of stress, which actually can be catastrophic. So over time, you're looking at not only learning to manage your stress better, not only learning to deload that stress, but also managing to really, through sound protocols, building that stress resilience, right? So ultimately, you can handle a lot more of it if you had to.
That's it.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. And then in regards to the caffeine, of course, that would literally be the same thing. Caffeine, in my opinion, can be considered as another stressor. Ultimately, it rams catecholamines through the roof, and that is a stressor in itself. So if we can, well, say for an eco state now, like you can't necessarily have caffeine now, in say like 6 months, you may well be able to have a pretty good flat white, do you know what I mean? And enjoy it without, all the kind of caffeine symptoms.
Yeah, just go decaf. I mean, a lot of time I drink decaf, caffeinated coffee, and your body adapts to it, get used to it. But someone else asked before, said, is it common to have physical symptoms of anxiety when you don't actually feel anxious? Something I struggle with. But yeah, this is actually kind of the position I was in. I didn't feel anxious, but my body was going, no. My body was trying to tell me to kind of stop, slow down, things like that. But I weren't listening. Probably, there's probably some unresolved things that maybe you're unaware of or that you've just not noticed. And there will be something. So the more connected you can be to your body, the more you can listen to it, the more you kind of be able to explore those feelings safely. But yeah, you can have like loads of physical symptoms without feeling like you're actually anxious.
Like that, mate. Like that. Awesome. Just trying to see if there's anything else.
Someone else asked, how do you know when you're ready to do the work?
Shane, sorry.
You're ready to do the work, the deep inner work, when you're just willing to basically just drop your bullshit, stop being a victim, and just take full responsibility for your feelings and your kind of outcome, and willing to kind of take action. You have to be willing to be wrong. So you have to be willing to challenge yourself, because your beliefs shape your inner reality and your inner reality shapes your outer reality. If you want your life to change, then you have to change, and certain things that you believe have to be wrong. Some people it's a bit confronting to actually kind of recognize they're wrong about certain things, but the more you can have compassion for yourself and lead with compassion and not judge yourself, the more you're going to be able to actually explore yourself. If you're kind of judging yourself too harshly and you have a poor relationship with yourself, I'd start with that first. Practice that non-judgment, practice observing, practice understanding yourself, and have more compassion. And when you do that, when you actually go to explore yourself, your relationship with that part of you is actually going to go, you're actually quite nice to me, yeah, I'm going to work with you. But if you're actually horrible to yourself all the time, you're always judging yourself, when it comes to actually exploring that feeling, that part of you that's feeling that way and creating this pattern, it's not going to want to communicate with you. It's not going to speak to you, and you're basically just going to have a poor relationship with yourself. So you have to have a fairly decent relationship with yourself before you kind of do the inner work, because it is very confronting, and you have to be able to lead with compassion.
I think that is very, very important. I think when it comes to your, I mean, look, for a lot of guys or ladies that are coming here, like from a compositional standpoint, wanting to improve your body fat and all the rest of it, get leaner, get stronger. If your belief system is very, very low, you genuinely don't believe you can change. You are so used to being subpar in your opinion that is, and you constantly put yourself down, you constantly tell that to yourself. Like, how would you feel if I was stood in front of you telling you that you weren't good enough for 24 hours a day? Eventually you're going to think he's just a prick, and you're going to want to get rid of him, and you are, but eventually you will start to believe that somewhat. You're going to start to think, well, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I can't do this. And then your own belief system takes a hit, and then you won't start doing what it takes ultimately to better yourself, whether it's getting in shape or helping yourself from an anxiety standpoint. So you've got to be your own best fan. Like I always say, you've got to be your own greatest fan. Sometimes you've got to be arrogant somewhat to say that I cannot fail. It's impossible. Like, I am more than good enough for this. And that sometimes is enough to pull you through and really reinforce that belief system. And I often see, and I'll tell you now from experience, I see so many people fail due to lack of belief. Not in my program, because I'll reinforce it from the very off, but I see so many people fail from, Facebook groups and all the rest of it, just purely because they don't believe in themselves. Okay, it comes down to your own belief systems.
A lot of these things are unconscious, so they're so deeply ingrained that any critic is learned from us from, if we had critical parents growing up, or when people kind of spoken negatively to us, we've basically taken on that, and that becomes our inner critic. So the way we speak to ourselves is often the way that we was kind of spoken to when we was younger. And at the same time, in terms of kind of what you were saying just now, in terms of the kind of relationship with yourself, you have to just basically practice being kind to yourself, and just notice how you feel. Even I noticed at some point I was judging other people, and I was like, this doesn't make me feel good. I don't feel nice judging other people. So I was like, you know what? Let me just practice not judging other people. Noticing, observing the story that comes up in my head, observing the first thought, but at the same time with meditation, just allowing it to be, to not have to react and respond and just go, interesting that I'm having that thought. And just seeking to understand yourself and realizing why you have these things, But a lot of times in terms of what you're saying in terms of losing weight or why people sabotage us, they don't believe that they're worthy enough. They don't believe they're good enough. They don't believe that they can deserve to be happy. And, if you still have this image of yourself in a certain way, you're going to just only see that, and you're going to project that. And when you project that out into your outer reality, you're going to create that reality. So before you can actually change your outer reality and how you look on the outside, you have to change what's in here, because that's where it all starts from.
Love that, mate. I really think that identity, that's one of the first things I take my clients through. I have a pyramid, and ultimately it has skills and drills, behaviors, beliefs, and identity. And ultimately how you see yourself is everything. Like, if everybody was actually very honest with me, they don't come to me to get abs and a nice bum. They come to me to get them things to change how they see themselves and how much spring they have in their step in the morning and how good they feel about themselves. If really, when we look at the baseline, all we want to do is actually just be happy with who we are and our life. That's it. And a lot of the time, that is actually perception driven, right?
Yeah. All we want, all everyone wants, is love, to be loved and accepted. But we seek all of these things outside of ourselves. But the reality is the only place it can be found is within us. And loving and accepting ourselves is, that is the first and the foremost thing that we should be focusing on. If we can focus on that, if everybody can love and accept themselves, we'd solve most of our issues. We'd realize that everything we seek outside of ourselves, in the job, the car, the clothes, the friends, the relationships, all of these things we seek outside of ourselves, they can only be found within. And once we've found it within, then we're naturally vibing on that level, and we'll attract all of that sort of stuff to happen anyway. Because otherwise, when you're coming from that place of lack where we want things, it's a very, very needy place, and your body will kind of repel those things. And this is why we self-sabotage, and we don't. We find it hard to achieve the things that we want.
Spot on, Shane, mate. Spot on. I think that's it. I didn't see it. I just had a little quick flick through. I didn't see any more questions, mate. But I think that is all, mate. Honestly, Shane, thank you very much for today. It's been amazing. It's genuinely been very insightful, very educational. I feel as though the audience got a hell of a lot from that too. and they can go away and implement some cool stuff straight away too. It's been amazing, mate. Thank you very much.
Well, happy to do it again anytime, mate. Just let me know sort of when, and we'll just make it happen.
It'd be an absolute pleasure to have you on again, mate. It genuinely will. Thank you very much. Yeah, Shane, I'm going to call it there because I think my battery's going to go in literally about 2 seconds, mate. Thank you for being awesome, Shane. I'll catch you later, but thank you.
Grateful, mate. Take care.
See you later.